Hello, I'm State Senator Susan Moran, and on today's episode of In Your Corner, we will be discussing housing, homelessness, and what we can do about it with a double slate of 4 amazing guests. Stay with me as we get right into today's discussion here on In Your Corner. We're joined today by 4 leaders working in the Plymouth area. First up, we have Stephen Cole, Executive Director of the Plymouth Foundation, and Kathy Dunn, Chair of the Plymouth Affordable Housing Trust, here to share their insights on housing with us. Thank you both for being here, Steve and Kathy. Let me just start with some introductory questions, if that's all right. I'll start with Stephen. Can you tell me about your work and its relationship to housing in Plymouth?
Sure. At the Economic Development Foundation, shorthand is the Plymouth Foundation, we focus on 5 broad areas, and it's largely intended to position Plymouth's current economy for the next economy. We focus on things like land use. How we use our land matters. If we don't use it the right way, you don't have future adaptive uses.
Well, there's a limited amount of it, obviously.
Precisely, and you can't put housing in places that used to be an industrial fill, right? There's a lot of mitigation that has to go along with something like that, just to be able to use that land responsibly again. So one of the things we try to do is take a lens from my last 20 years working in places like Hartford and in Springfield, where it's a very strong post-industrial past. We don't have that same kind of a past, though. We're not a post-industrial city. We're a post-nuclear community. Mm-hmm. We used our land a little differently over the last 400 years, and really that lends us a great future for how we can use our land in the future. So land use aside, some of the other things we focus on are things like small business development, workforce development, entrepreneurship and innovation, which is one of my favorite topics to work on, and lastly what we call MECA, marketing, events, and cultural assets. So Plymouth has a lot of cultural assets. We like to promote those as a way to not only strengthen tourism, but to attract new types of investors too.
Well, you know, that all of that is sort of seeds for future healthy and vibrant growth for Plymouth going forward. And an integral piece of that, of course, is people and housing. And Kathy, what can we just start with you on your view of what access to housing is like in Plymouth right now, and how the pandemic has impacted housing in Plymouth?
Well, one of the impacts of housing in Plymouth, although we have created, and I'll get into that later, created some new housing in the past 2 or 3 years, is that housing is so expensive. And you speak about workforce development. People can't afford to work here and live here. Even people work in the town hall. So that's a problem. The rental housing is so expensive because it is part of Boston regional area. The federal area and state area includes a region, and we're paying the same rents as people in affordable housing in Boston. That's a problem.
So the formula is a problem.
It is. Additionally, the pandemic has affected the price of housing in Plymouth County. It's increased 17%.
Huge.
The people are moving to the suburbs. And people are buying up things for affordable, for Airbnbs and things like that, temp housing. So that's that has affected us. Biggest, I'd say, impact is we have a hard time getting contractors to build affordable housing, and now they're busier than ever, and everything is a lot more expensive.
Well, in the supply chain is very slow now that the pandemic has affected housing.
Huge problem. So the Affordable Housing Trust is their job is to create rentals and to facilitate people buying homes, single-family homes. Now, that is, we've made some progress on that, both with a contractor who has built 50, almost 55 new units in Plymouth in the past 3 years.
Those are rental units?
These are rental units. 22 of them are in Manomet, and 32 of them are in out on 44 near Market Basket. It's called Carver Landing. And, this has been accomplished with the Affordable Housing Trust working with the CPC and the contractor. And we're pretty proud of the fact that that's a lot of housing that's been created. In addition, there's 40B regulations, and 20 to 25% of that has to be affordable. And so we have several, quite a few actually, 40B projects, and that has increased our number of affordables. I'd like to talk maybe a little later about the actual cost for people, even though their income qualified.
That's a good point, because we have to look to the future to have formulas that work. But before we get there, I just want to go back to an earlier point that you made about housing prices. And, they're rising everywhere. We talked about the supply issues. We talked about, the workforce actually affects some contractors' ability to continue to build projects. And, I want to just switch to Stephen and ask your view of the impact of housing prices rising everywhere in terms of economics and the effect on our business communities.
Oh no, that's such an insightful question, Senator. Partly because they inform each other, right? If you can't get a workforce to live within proximity to the place where you need them to work, restaurants, retail, fill in the gaps, wherever it is, they will not work there. There's no housing, so they will not work there. They have to commute too far, so they will not work there. That means that business will not have success at that location. That business also has to be able to pay competitive wages so that person who's working there can either afford the mortgage or the rent. Hard numbers aside, my family, we grew up in Boston, originally from Dorchester. We moved to Cape Cod, partly because it was cheaper once upon a time.
As did I.
And so when I left to go to college, when I came back, I was looking at where am I going to live. I chose for a time to live in the North Shore. Now here's a harrowing tale. $2,000 rent, first, last, security. Just to move in the door, I needed to pony up $6,000, to say nothing of moving expenses.
What young person can easily do that?
Correct, especially if they don't have a job right out of college. Now, if we just take hard numbers right now, too, about, across all sectors, all industries, four-year graduates last year, on average, we're making about $50,000 a year. Well, we know that you lose about a third of that off the top to income tax. Over the course of the year, you lose about half of that over to sales tax and income. There's myriad other taxes you pay. Half your salary, for the most part, is gone to taxes. So now you're left with $25,000. If you're paying, let's just say you're paying $12,000 a year for rent, right? $1,000 a month. That's reasonable. You're left with now half of the $25,000 that you had remaining to begin with to pay all your other expenses. And I just gave you an example for rent, not heat, not hot water, not internet, not your cell phone, not your phone, your car, not the gas you put in your car.
Right.
So it's very difficult, you can imagine, for a young person. Now, skipping ahead, we have an aging demographic here. We have an aging population here in Plymouth County. By the time you breach the bridge and get on that side of Bourne, as you well know, the median age jumps to 55.
Right.
Most of the housing we're even seeing built in this area has actually been age-restricted 55 plus. So what we're really telling folks, too, is that these young kids who are graduating high school, you can't even legally live in any of the new units of housing that we're building in this area for another 40 years.
Right. Yeah,
So
that sort of is not a welcome door
Right.
as you're coming into the district.
And I just want to add one more thing that's another dimension to all of this in terms of affordability, because I love what you're doing, Kathy. I mean, it's such an important task for it's an uphill battle, Sisyphean, right? When you consider that the median, for affordability, right, we're talking about 80% of AMI, right?
Right.
Our area, I mean, Plymouth's a little lower. It's closer to $85,000, $95,000 a year. But let's just go $100,000 for argument's sake. you have to, if you're making $80,000 to $85,000 a year in our area, you're considered in that AMI threshold. That's a cop. That's a teacher. These are positive contributing members of our community who qualify for this affordable threshold.
Necessary members, absolutely.
Right. So the housing does absolutely inform what we have available to us in a labor pool, in our workforce. A lot of the people who work in our restaurants, they're driving up here from Providence and Rhode Island. That's something to have to worry about.
It's a dependability issue for the business owner. If there's weather, people have emergencies come up and notice time. A lot of businesses they build their staff on convenience, and it's just not available anymore.
And a lot of the restaurant and the retail jobs that we see, they're for younger people for the most part. I have friends who live on the Cape. Forgive me, touch my microphone, Senator. We have friends who live on the Cape, and they are older. And when they hurt their knee or they hurt their back, they can't walk the floor, and there's no plan B for them. There's no pension. There's no real sick leave. So my concern with an aging demographic, a lot of these jobs that we rely on in restaurants and retail, they're intended for young people. Mostly in college. That's how I paid for college even. That's how I bought my first car, working at the Binnacle in Orleans.
Absolutely. I could carry 6 water glasses as a waitress.
I never mastered the one-handed tray thing. I never had that kind of flexibility or dexterity. But if we don't have housing opportunities for these young folks to occupy these types of jobs that I just mentioned, we don't have the upward trajectory that we can look forward to creating stability in our community, where we have new job growth and new business growth.
And we have the kind of community that people flee from instead of are attracted to. And I want to just bounce back to Kathy and to go ahead with those numbers.
Well, I want to say, I'll tell you the numbers. For affordable rentals now, we're looking at up to $1,800 a month for a 1-bedroom apartment, and $2,000 plus for a 2-bedroom. Now, this is affordable housing. Now, we all know, and as you've talked, people are spending 50% of their income to house themselves. That leaves,
right.
And I'm glad you brought up that figure because that's exactly right. If people are lucky enough to have a housing voucher from the federal government in Section 8 or other state vouchers, they are paying 30% of their income. That's what they're supposed to be paying. Now, as we talk about providing housing for people who work in our town, housing we've begun to recognize is a health imperative. People who are not in stable housing have greater physical, mental problems and safety issues, especially if children are involved. Try to get an affordable rental, even if you have Section 8, for a family with 3 or 4 children. Good luck. Mm-hmm. We don't have it. Most of what we're building, like you said, Stephen, are 1-bedrooms, a few 2-bedrooms, some handicap. I also have a long history with working with people with disabilities. And when I was doing mental health counseling, I was doing outreach counseling in people's homes. Wow, does that give you a new perspective?
It's an inside view.
Yeah.
As I'm just trying to step out and take an overview of our conversation between the economy and housing, is it fair to say that we really have to update our formulas right now for this post-pandemic situation? We've got ARPA funding coming from the American Rescue Plan, and I think we've got to continue this conversation with the community so that folks have kind of a more welcoming understanding of the fact that the housing issue is not the same as it was years ago. Housing is something that's integral to our community and our economy, and it's something we want to incorporate into our neighborhoods for a really well-rounded and flourishing community going forward. Fair to say, is that the marrying of the two views?
I would agree with that, yeah.
Yeah, and I certainly would too. People want to buy affordable single-family homes, so we offer a buy-down program where we offer them a second mortgage up to $10,000 to help bridge the gap between what they have for a down payment and what they need in order to be able to afford housing expenses. We know how expensive it is to own a home.
That flexibility is so key, and you need experts like both of you to be able to provide people like me in government, as your senator, with ideas for how do we pivot? How do we look at the time we're in now and address the housing crisis in a targeted fashion as quickly as possible? I want to really thank you both for appearing on In Your Corner and lending your expertise, and I look forward to continuing to work with you going forward. Thank you very much.
Can I just say how important your roundtable was regarding this three-segment roundtable that brought together all the people who are interested in housing.
Oh, please, wonderful to see you both there. We've had 3 sessions, and we'll continue as the ARPA funding comes in. And thanks for saying that, Kathy. I appreciate it.
Well, it's so important.
It changed the way my board thinks of it too. I mean, we don't focus on housing because there's other folks that are already working on it as a core focus. We want to add value to what all those other folks are working on. But just the sheer numbers of the people that are moving into our area, it's happening already, right? I mean, the last 50 years, 911 people on average have moved into Plymouth or been born in Plymouth.
Wow.
The population's grown by almost 1,000 people per year for the last 50 years, almost 2,000 people for the last 5 years. And when you look at just the assessments for residential, it's gone from 82% of the tax base in Plymouth when I started in this role 2 years ago to now 85% in this current fiscal year.
Wow, we've got to keep up.
Industry's gone down 27%.
Wow.
The industrial assessments.
Well, thank you for being on it for these, pretty much monthly meetings with me. I really appreciate that. And Rep. Muratori,
Yes.
as well as Rep. Lanata, where the delegation is really focused on this for the community. And thanks for your participation.
I've worked in so many regions and in 2 states. You, Matt, and Kathy, they're the best delegation I've ever had the pleasure to work with. I really mean that. I really mean it. You are so attentive to what we need in the local level. You really do take your role seriously. It's not just a part-time gig with benefits for you guys. I'm so enamored and so impressed by the way the 3 of you especially work together.
That's so kind, and I'm so appreciative, and good partners makes it easy.
And
Thank you.
really support everything you said, and I thank you sincerely.
Thank you both so much.
For taking on important topics.
Bravely, too,
like
because these are not easy.
Childcare
Yeah.
and affordable housing. And they're not easy. And there are no easy solutions.
Up next, we'll be talking about homelessness in our communities and some of the resources available to support people who are at risk of becoming homeless. Welcome back. I'm joined now by John Yaswinski, the president and CEO of Father Bill's in Mainspring, a charitable organization serving the homeless, as well as Connie Melahoris, president of the Plymouth Task Force to End Homelessness. Thank you both for being here.
Welcome. Thank you for inviting us.
Oh, it's a huge, important topic, especially as we go into the cold weather and end of the year. In fact, let's start with just hearing about both of your organizations and the work that you're doing for Plymouth. Please go first.
Good. Thank you. Thank you for having me. So Father Bill's in Mainspring is a regional South Shore organization, and we provide emergency shelter for families and individuals across the region, and we provide permanent supportive housing. For the town of Plymouth and the Plymouth region, we've been partnering with Connie's task force for many years, and together we're taking care the best we can people that are in need of shelter over the winters. And for Father Bill's in Mainspring, we've been partnering with the federal government, and we've brought over 60 units of permanent housing to chronic homeless individuals, people that struggle outside in our community in Plymouth for permanent housing, 60 units over the last 10 years. So we're very proud of that.
What an accomplishment.
Yeah.
That's incredible. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Connie.
Okay, the Plymouth Task Force to End Homelessness is a local organization, and we began by, in 2004, began by establishing an emergency sheltering program, which was located in the churches, and we've been doing that since 2004. Our program is centered on using church sites as host sites, and we also have been providing permanent housing via being able to purchase 2 units in North Plymouth with the help of the community preservation community in the town of Plymouth.
Wow, congratulations. So it sounds like there's a combination of faith-based organizations and community resources. What does it look like in terms of how you put together the financial resources for your efforts?
Yeah, so for Father Bill's in Mainspring, we in the beginning, we started in the early 80s. It was really a faith-based initiative, and then became a established 501c3 nonprofit where you took public money. And we realized by taking money from the state and the federal government, we always thought that homelessness would just be a temporary response. And here we are still dealing with it. So we needed to get more resources just to take care of the families and individuals that was coming to our door. So for Father Bill's in Mainspring, really we've been able to, the majority of our resources are public money. But the faith community continues to support us greatly, and getting the private dollars from the community really helps us because it's unrestricted and we can take care of that person right in front of us, where a lot of times the public resources has some red tape and you got to serve exactly what the federal government is saying. So it's been nice to have support of both. Father Bill McCarthy always used to say we need a public and a private partnership of these funders, and that's really what we've tried to focus on through the years.
Well, I can see where the flexibility is needed, Connie. I mean, looking at it from 2 perspectives, these are instances, these are our community members who may have chronic health or other issues, and I imagine there's also a combination of new folks, depending on circumstances, especially with the pandemic. Yeah. People who never thought they would have the financial challenges that they do now have been put in that circumstance. Can you talk a little bit about that?
We haven't seen a lot of folks that have been displaced by the pandemic. It continues to be folks that are experiencing homelessness because of substance abuse issues and that sort of thing. And our organization has been all volunteer. All our money goes towards our programs. But we do partner with Father Bill's, and they provide us with some staffing for our overnights program and for the subsidies to help people into permanent housing. So
that's an incredible partnership going forward, and I can see where the flexibility is so key.
I would say, to add to the question with Connie, is what we've seen throughout the whole region and in Plymouth and Kingston also, especially too, is that so many people lost their jobs during the pandemic, but that there was thankfully an eviction moratorium.
Right.
And so now that that's started to lift, though, we are really starting to see an enormous amount of calls from people whose rents and mortgages are so large that even the great rental assistance we've gotten from the state or from the feds still can't make up for that difference. So we are seeing a tremendous amount of pressure on the prevention programs right now. We usually averaged last year before the pandemic, or a couple years ago, 5 to 10 calls a month of prevention. Those calls have tripled in families and individuals that are in need of or at risk of homelessness right now.
So just to lift up that statement as well, we're talking about really serving homeless folks and making sure they're healthy and warm, but also a preventative aspect
Right.
where you're looking at risk families, and you must be getting referrals from various organizations all of the time, and yet your administrative, sort of your office paperwork side is something that you're really not overly equipped to deal with, because you're dealing with the practical.
Yeah, no, we have a lot of case managers that are sitting there trying to meet with that family, that individual. They're in a hotel, they're doubled up, sleeping on a floor with their children in an apartment, maybe at grandma's house, and then they've got all this paperwork to do. And it's like, we've got to solve this crisis in front of us. So you're right, there's a lot of red tape when it comes to, like, getting all the checks boxes. But the resources have been there, and we can't say enough to the state and the federal government for those resources, because we've really been able to stop, a real grave issue, that we were really concerned about,
We also get calls for rental assistance, and we are able to provide a minimum amount to help people pay up their rent. And those calls keep coming, yes.
And, I do agree. I think we've got to keep a watch on that and see what the future holds with respect to potential ending of moratoriums.
Right.
Let me ask you, Connie, what more support do individuals and families need right now if if they've lost their homes, especially during the holidays and for the winter?
Well, obviously, we have our shelter program that's up and running for individuals, and we also do refer people to Father Bill's Mainspring if they're needing, housing assistance and that kind of thing. If people go to our website, there's a link to the resources that provides people with information on things like food pantries, meal programs, and other resources that are available. Now, for our overnights program, we're always looking for people to serve meals and or chaperone at night. We have one paid staff person from Father Bill's, but we also supply a second person for safety and health reasons. So, yeah.
Wow. And, we've been having housing forums. My office, my Senate office, my staff, as well as Rep. Moratori and Rep. Lenatra. Yeah. And I thank you so much for participating, because we want to really take all of the experts in the room with housing and incorporate kind of wraparound services from beginning to end, and both of you do that so expertly. When we're looking at, so you talked about website, what can people who are watching right now do to help? And I want to think about sort of the near term, as well as what would be the most helpful financial assistance or program assistance going forward on the long term. Do you want to start?
I would say, the community of Plymouth, we don't have a state contract that provides for shelter beds. So really all the money that Father Bill's and Plymouth Task Force are doing is raising private money to make sure that we're taking care of people so that people don't die outside. Right. So any way that people can financially, if they have the means to help us, or as Connie said, help with in-kind, either volunteer hours or food or supplies. But so we're stepping up and continue to try to get the state to think about Plymouth has a homeless problem, help it financially. I think for long term and big picture, and we've chatted about this, and thank you for hosting those forums on housing, is there's a lot of, thankfully I've been doing this for 25 years, and there's a lot of resources right now, with the President's Recovery Act bill.
Right.
And there's an opportunity now to put money into solutions like housing. And I would say, for Plymouth and the community long term, we can do better than just sheltering people in the basement of a church. We were doing that in the 80s. Housing works. Father Bill's in Mainspring and many organizations across this country, 93% success rate of people staying housed are most chronic people struggling with mental health and substance abuse. People getting off the streets and staying housed over 3 years. 93%. We can do better. We should try to get out of the shelters. We should all have a conversation locally about, let's use this opportunity, because the money is there, to build some housing, get some housing for our poorest neighbors.
And that can be life changing
Life
and
changing.
community
Absolutely.
changing.
Yeah.
Connie, your view?
Same thing. Emergency sheltering is not the answer. Housing is the answer. In the long term, it saves money. It's economically, better to put people into housing rather than having them live on the streets.
For everyone,
For
right?
everyone,
the whole,
absolutely.
The tax
Abs-
consequences, the
absolutely.
health
Yeah.
costs, that everyone really contributes
Right.
to the challenge.
Right. And our biggest challenge is, now that the money is available, is finding a location upon which we can erect a structure that would contain affordable studio type apartments along with some other stuff. And we've been looking for a few years now for a suitable property.
Like a dormitory style?
No. This would be studio type apartments.
Oh, nice.
Right now we have 3 properties: a duplex and a standalone in North Plymouth. That's congregate housing. That's okay, but it's better for people to be able to have their own efficiency studio type apartment.
Absolutely. Well, both of you are leaders in your endeavors, and we've certainly appreciated that in our housing discussions that we've been having. But tell me who the partners are that you work with, and how this gets organized, and how does the help really get pieced together in terms of nuts and bolts. For example, maybe give a fictitious example, if you can, of how this works.
Well, we partner with Father Bills in the emergency shelter and the housing piece, and we have been very fortunate that the Community Preservation Committee has been supportive of us, because they helped us to purchase the properties that we have in North Plymouth, and we have a very strong working relationship with that committee, and Bill Cohan, the chairperson in particular.
He's incredible. He does
absolutely
so many things in the community.
Absolutely. And on the the local level, I mean, we have a lot of individuals that support us financially, and also some organizations. We do get financial support from many. So
That's great.
I mean, I would say, when I think about it in a sense of when you try to even just combat homelessness, what do you need for those partners is, as Connie had mentioned, the people that we assist have a lot of medical issues, chronically homeless. So they've been living out on the streets a long time. And so having a strong medical provider is very key. And we've been able to see, like, Medicaid and Mass Health is actually paying us to house people, because it's more cost effective to house a homeless person. And when you have the Medicaid saying, yes, we're going to help pay for this person, because we see those costs go down. They're not ricocheting in and out of emergency rooms and in and out of, hospitals and things. The other piece to this is to make sure that you have, as Connie said, the local government, that people realize, like, you can have a vibrant community when you get people off the streets. It's a compassionate thing, but it also makes good business sense. We recently had a bank, the CEO of a bank, donate land out of their parking lot and said, let's do 10 units of housing for homeless people. When we start having the business communities understand that ending homelessness is good for the community, good for the commercial community, that's a win-win. So the business community can be a major player right now that could help us end homelessness.
That's such a huge example, because, in sort of times past, there have always been homeless folks, always folks who have struggled, and mental illness is a contributor. These are complicated health issues and mental health issues, and they're tough and they're sad, and so there's sort of a reflex of kind of just wanting to hope that it somehow goes away, or just somehow that the problem gets solved, and that somehow what both of you have done is really put it right in the forefront. And these are our neighbors, these are members of our community. Folks simply, everyone struggles at one point in their life, every family does, and this is this person's time. And to have the business community really showcase almost a terrific housing opportunity, and this is what it looks like, and it's not scary. We can kind of pull it together, so literally wraparound services. That's just terrifically exciting.
Yeah.
Since it is the holiday time that we're having this particular discussion, let me just, as a kind of final question to each of you, Connie, maybe first, what would be your ideal for making the homeless and folks who are at risk of being homeless in the best situation they possibly can? What would your ideal be? What's on your Christmas wish list?
To have everybody housed and off the streets. That's number one. I mean, we do our best to keep people safe by providing emergency shelter, but as I said earlier, it's not the end goal.
And what is the best way to donate if people can and wish to? Do you happen to know the website off the top of your head?
Yes, it's Plymouth-taskforce-homeless.org.
And is there a way right through the website that
Yes.
folks can donate?
Yes, there is.
Oh, terrific. What is on your holiday list?
I think that if I agree with Connie, our tagline is nobody should be homeless.
Right.
So big picture, of course, no matter any day that anybody asked me that, it would be nobody's homeless. And I would hope that we can continue to build the political will, that even if people struggle with our missions, that they would see it as maybe makes good business sense also, right? I would say for this holiday, though, this pandemic, our organizations, our staff, they never stopped coming to work. They never paused. And a lot of our frontline workers are low-income earners. And it would really be great if we all realized the value of some of our frontline workers and how valuable they have been through this pandemic. It's not ending. Our shelters were still, last night I was on the phone with the Executive Office of Health and Human Services because we've got an outbreak at one of the shelters. It's still happening. And it's to make sure that we really could show how appreciative we are of the heroic work of our employees.
And let me add, and our volunteers.
Volunteers, great, yes.
The people who stay overnight as volunteers with our friends in the shelter.
Just to wrap up, I'm not at all surprised that both of you, who are tremendous leaders and really the ultimate givers professionally in this field, are really just pointing to the folks who you work with, and that's no surprise at all. So thank you for that. Really appreciate the uplifting kind of end to our conversation. What's going to continue to be challenging work, but we are making some progress, and we're hopeful for that. So thank you.
You're welcome.
I want to thank all of our guests for joining me in this episode. If you have questions or topics you'd like to see discussed, or if you just need to reach out to our office in the Senate, you can call 617-722-1330 or email me directly at susan.moran@masenate.gov. You can also find me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or my new website, SenatorSueMoran.com. That's Senator, SUMORAN.com. Thank you all for watching today. I'm Senator Susan Moran, and I'll be in your corner.